live from occupied Duwamish territory.
Sure. I mean, I was like most Americans, didn't know anything about coal. Grew up in California, kind of had this idea that electricity kind of flowed down from a golden bowl in the sky.
Magic fairy dust.
Yeah. And then in 2001, not long after Bush was elected, his first term, in the spring of 2001, the Cheney energy plan was rolled out, and it was pretty clear that coal was going to make a big comeback.
They had some friends in the industry.
Right, right. Yeah, and so the New York Times Magazine called me up and asked me if I would go down and write about the comeback of the coal industry, and I said sure, but I didn't know anything about coal, and I didn't even know that we still burn coal. So I went down to West Virginia to look into this for them, and it was really just mind-boggling, eye-opening experience for me because I'd grown up in Silicon Valley and, you know, loved technology and had written a lot about technology. I even worked at Apple in the early days. But I never get any sense of where the electrons come from that powers our digital lives.
Yeah.
And with my trip to West Virginia, I sort of saw for the first time, you know, the ugly underbelly of digital culture and this sort of clean, high-tech world that we live in. And it was really compelling for me. And I spent a couple of months looking into coal mining and visiting coal plants and things for the Times, and then wrote that piece. It was a cover story, and then I realized I still have much more to tell.
Yeah, there's a big world of coal out there.
Right. So then I went to work on the book and spent 3 or 4 years doing that. About coal, I mean, you know, it's not exactly Paris Hilton or something like that, right? There's trying to make coal sexy enough for someone to. It's hard enough to sell books and get people to read books anyway.
Yeah.
About something like coal, it's difficult. So I thought of it as a kind of tour through a subculture, sort of like if I were writing about skate punks or something like that.
Sure.
That it was this sort of industrial underbelly. And I'm as surprised as anyone really now to see how central coal has become to all of the energy and climate questions that we're struggling with right now. I think it's really the sort of 800-pound gorilla when it comes to all this.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, when the first time I saw mountaintop removal mine, it was pretty clear that this was not something I was going to come out and sort of be a booster for.
Sure.
I tried to be, you know, I'm not an environmentalist per se. I've never been a member of any environmental group. And I didn't want to go at it from simply a kind of how evil is coal kind of screed. I think that coal has been incredibly important in kind of powering our modern life. You know, we wouldn't have this world that we live in today without coal. It was the engine that drove the Industrial Revolution. You know, and I spent a lot of time with coal miners and going into mines, and really love these guys. And you know, they're sort of like firemen or something. You know, a really tightly bound culture of mostly men. And I really I really wanted to capture the full context of this more than just to say sort of that this is an evil, dirty rock, which of course it is in certain levels, but it's also more complicated than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That whether or not coal's on its way out, I think that's the $65,000 question, or the $65 trillion question. I mean, obviously in the long run, yes. I mean, everyone knows that coal is not because we're going to run out of it, but because we're going to invent better, cheaper ways of generating electricity that don't cook the planet.
Sure.
The question is how long a time that is. And I think in the U.S., you know, I think we're going to start moving away from coal pretty quickly. I don't think that that's true in the developing world. I think that China and India and other countries are still going to be burning coal for a while. But I do think that this is in the U.S., we're at a real turning point because we now have a president who is very serious about doing something about climate, it's pretty clear that some kind of a cost on carbon dioxide emissions, whether it's probably a cap and trade bill is going to pass either this year or next year in Congress, it's going to begin to change the whole economics of the power industry. and the one who's going to take the biggest hit, no question about it, is coal.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I think that it's a great goal. I think it's going to be very difficult to shut these plants down because they're making a lot of money and they're paid for. And it's one thing to stop a plant that's being built. It's another thing to shut one down that's still going, that still have life in it. But that's what makes it a great fight. It's because it is really an ambitious fight. And people like Jim Hansen, the NASA scientist who's the kind of godfather of climate science, has basically said that within the next 20 years we have to zero out emissions from coal if we want to have a planet that's with a climate that's at all like the climate that we've lived in for the last several hundred years. So this is going to be the battle. I mean, Hansen himself is talking about having to bulldoze coal plants, and I think that this is the real forefront of things. Can we shut down old coal plants? Is there a way to do this that doesn't destroy the economy, that allows people to think about alternatives? How do you build the political momentum and network around this idea? I mean, I think it's a very bold but very important fight.
Very cool. Very cool.
Well, unfortunately, one of the things that I kind of concluded after working on this book for as long as I had and looking at what's going on with coal is that the world is not serious about cutting emissions, and emissions are in fact rising. There's been a little blip right now because of the economic problems, but in fact they've gone from like 1% a year to 3% a year globally, largely because of coal burning in the developing world. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. I really think that we're going to blow through all of these targets that we have.
Like the Kyoto and whatever comes next.
Well, no, I mean targets. Well, I think yes, that kind of stuff too. I mean, there will be some kind of agreements, but I think that these ideas that we're going to limit, the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere to 350 parts per million or 450, or we're going to try to limit climate change to 2 degrees of warming. There's all these targets out there that various scientists and groups have identified as thresholds for serious change.
Yeah.
I think we're going to blow through them all. I think that I see no evidence right now that the world takes cutting emissions seriously. There's been all talk, no action. And so my book is going to be about what we will do. Adaptation, geoengineering,